Villains.
So I decided to do this video because the I think people, especially the younger generation now,
The younger generation. What
misunderstand
have we become, Thurman?
misunderstand the point of a villain, right? I'm gonna be honest. A lot of people think that a villain has to have these amazing goals, have to be extremely super duper well written, and I'm sorry, but a good villain can be a simple villain.
It can be both.
Despite what you may think about Dragon Ball Z, Frieza at the base of it is a good villain. Why do I think this? Because villains are the opposite side of a hero, right? When you think of if you, let's just go back to
So if you
basic
have a shitty simple hero, you can have a shitty simple villain.
so so if we take the basics of like a hero and villain, right? Batman and Joker, for example. Why is Joker such a good villain to Batman? Because Joker essentially is Joker's simple nature of causing havoc, causing being a trouble for Batman, putting Batman to be on his toes, right? Like being there just to be an obstacle for Batman. Joker.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is Batman is all about like order, and whereas Joker wants chaos.
Yeah.
They complete each other in an ironic way. They kind of they try to destroy each other.
So
Although I do want to say that you don't always need that for villain. Like for example, Hisoka isn't Gon's opposite, but at the same token, I think Hisoka oddly does make your point pretty well. I made a solo video about Hisoka a long time ago, and the point I made in that video is what's great about Hisoka is he really doesn't have a fancy plan, a big motive. There's no artifact to steal. There's no realm to conquer. There's no world to the planet to blow up, race to destroy, etc., etc. Hisoka's literal only goal is to fight strong people because that's how he gets off. He is a dude who has a massive boner, and the only way to nut is to fight a strong dude. Like that is him in a nutshell. And everything he does in the entirety of the series is driven by that. And that makes him fucking scary because it's not this complex, nuanced thing where it's like, well, maybe I don't want to do that anymore. No, it's just I need to nut again, and the only way I can nut is if I fight you. So you best get over here, otherwise I'll forcibly do it. That makes him a scary villain because he's just a fucking dude with a crazy ass condition. I love it, right? So that's a perfect example of like a simple villain, and I would be curious if there's anyone out there that legitimately thinks that Hisoka isn't a good villain because he doesn't have like complex enough motives.
yeah, I think it's baffling to me that people have been taught, right? People think that a villain needs a redemption arc. They
That's
need to have these
bullshit.
complex
Villain
things.
does not need a redemption arc.
A villain is just what the name implies. A villain. A villain is supposed to be bad. I don't mind if a character who was a villain becomes good. It doesn't bother me. But my issue are those who get like for those who believe that villains, like just like a basic bitch villain, is a bad villain. No, the point of a villain is how cool they are, how they complement the hero to some degree, and somewhat of their motive. The reason why Frieza is a good villain is because Frieza's motive is fairly simple. He wants to be immortal, and he'll do anything to get that goal.
Yeah, and you know what? You're right, right? Because like I think back on Dragon Ball Z, and I have good memories, right? And it was kind of fun where it was like, yeah, Frieza he really, really wanted to be immortal. And it was kind of fun because Vegeta wanted the same thing, right? So you have this, like, thing where, like, you almost had two villains and then, like, a villain that kind of worked with them to defeat the bigger villain. And so, I mean, that arc was phenomenal. Even though I'm not the hugest Dragon Ball Z guy, but you're right. Like, Frieza was great in his simplicity. Even though he was simple, he worked.
So my thing is that and I'm not saying like there can be bad villains, simple villains that are bad, but I'm saying just to immediately just disclose a character, a villain, because of their motive, just because they're not essentially well written is bad. Not every villain has to be well written. I'm sorry.
I think if this proves anything, it proves how nuanced writing really is. Because, like, think about it, right? Like, I can think of really, really, really good villains that are good because of how complex they are. Think your, Corollos, your Meruems, your like I haven't read Berserk, but I hear fucking what's his name, Griffith. He's a pretty complex villain, isn't he?
Yeah.
No. Can you come up with better complex villains? My mind's at a blank here, but you know what I mean, right? Like really complex, like well known villains, right? Like you got any examples on your end?
Complex. I'm not
in the sense of like, okay. Unfortunately, all my examples are from Hunter x Hunter. And I was really hoping that you could help me diverse a bit more.
It's fine if you can do a better example than Hunter x Hunter. It's because I think complex is fine, but it shouldn't be the overall motivation for a villain.
Well, complexity is subjective as well, right? Because like as I was trying to think complexity, I was really like, is that complex or is that not complex? Really, at the end of the day, how complex can a motivation get? You know what I mean? Like how if you try to make it too complex, it becomes superficial and like just kind of complex for complexity's sake, which is why I think that the best kind of motivation for any villain or any character, but villain specifically, is a motivation that just kind of like feels like real, like someone like across the street could have that motivation. You know what I mean? Like that's what made Yoshihage Kira work so well. Like he was, you know what I mean? Like that is a perfect simple villain. He had a simple goal, but he did interesting things with that goal. So I guess the only, if I'm looking at differences between simple and complex, I guess complex, you could take like Meruem is pretty complex because he's born into a new world from a different species, and then like he's born, from being born, he has to understand the logic of our world and our laws and how we run it, and he has to understand his place in the world. That's pretty complex, and that worked well. And then you can just have a dude who, has a sexual thing and he can only get off by fighting people and he goes around doing that. Or a dude who, actually, Kira and Hisoka both have sexual things. With Kira, he has this fucking hand fetish, but he also really, his main thing is, I just want to live a peaceful life. But it's in my nature to kill. So he has this thing where he'll kill, but he's like really, really adamant about no one can see it, So like, I think, I guess I haven't run into the problem that you've been mentioning where you're seeing like people like, oh, you're not complex enough. I really haven't had that issue. But if that is the case and there are people saying that, you're right in the sense that motivations are very, very subjective. I've seen good villains and bad villains, but for the most part, as long as they have a believable motivation, it's really all you need. It really doesn't matter how simple or complex it is.
Because, I mean, let's take a different approach. Video game villains, for example. Majority of video game villains, your Mario's, Legend of Zelda's, they're very...
Bowser, kidnapped princess.
Really think like Bowser is a bad villain. I mean, he has a goal that he's been trying to get, because my thing is this, right? What makes a villain,
good
in writing bad, right? Like, what makes a bad villain? Like, because,
like, think back to, like, boring villains, right? I think if I was to try to guess what makes a villain bad, my first thing that I would say would be not understanding them, right? Not being able to put yourself in their shoes. Because when I see a villain on screen that makes me like, ooh, I really want to watch him, it's because I can kind of get into their mind and be like, I understand why they're doing that. I get why, like, a perfect example, I'll give an example from the recent RWBY season, right? So, like, Ozpin is currently, in his spirit is in the body of, like, of this boy that they're traveling with. It just goes into different bodies, right? And they're the team is trying to learn some information to help them, but, like, he's very oddly like, no, I don't want you to learn this. And when they're about to learn this information, Ozpin is like, no, like, I don't want you to learn this, and he's trying to lie to them and trick them so they won't learn it. And when they're about to learn it, he runs at the main character and tries to tackle her to the ground. Like, we're talking, like, real, like, you're getting on the edge of not being a hero anymore stuff, right? And the best part is, once we found out what the information was, I totally got it. I was like, I understand why he did that, And that made me really interested in what he was going to do next, because in this flashback, you realize, oh, he's been alive for centuries, and every single time his friends have betrayed him. Everyone he's ever trusted has betrayed him. So of course he didn't. Not only the main characters are mad at him because he didn't share the information, but also he knows that information itself is what makes people betray him, because they're scared from that information. So he had like a double reason to keep that information from people. And so once I learned that after the fact, I was like, I totally get it. I understand why he tried to tackle the main character. I understand why he's been such an asshole. And that is, I think, in a nutshell, what makes a good villain, because the ability to look at that villain and be like, I get why he's doing that. Yoshihage Kira, I understand why he crawled into the window of a fucking basement of a school, hid in a fucking suitcase, and tried to fucking get his bag back. I understand why Hisoka is going around setting up opponents years in advance because he has to have that next hit of dopamine. I understand why Frieza is doing what he wants. I understand because he loves life. He has a great life, and he wants to keep living it. The one thing that could stop his empire is dying. So it's all about understanding that villain, being able to put yourself in the position and be like, if I was them, would I do the same thing?
Yes, and it's crazy to me because people really just want they overthink stuff. Sometimes simple is better, right?
For real. 100%.
Like Dio, for example. Dio is not really that liked as a JoJo villain per se. He's liked, people like him, but among JoJo fans, people say he's the worst villain. I'm like, that's debatable. But I mean, Dio is a character who had a shitty life. His dad was extremely abusive to the point to where he was a drunk, hit him repeatedly. Dio had a terrible upbringing. And he was essentially intimidated by Jonathan because Jonathan was the complete opposite of him, right? And that kindness, and Dio is the example of if you're kind to someone who's always been, if you're kind to someone who's always never really had kindness to them, they're intimidated by that kindness.
Yeah, it's not like you can't just be nice. Like being nice isn't going to make the trauma go away for someone,
Right, like if anything, being nice to that person might make them hate you more.
Yeah,
and we see that. Dio is a prime example of that. Jonathan taking him in, being nice to him, and he's like, "Why are you so nice to me? I've always had shitty parents. I've always had, being nice to me pisses me off. I'm going to kill you for that." So Dio, if you analyze it, Dio is actually a great villain because his motivations are just born from the fact that he had a shitty upbringing and he didn't really, he was just angry at the fact that Jonathan had a great dad, So I think that people kind of overblow what makes a great villain. Joker.
No, you're definitely right because, like, I think the thing with fuck, I totally brain farted. Continue on your thing. I gotta remember what I was saying.
So basically, Joker being a villain, good villain because he compliments Batman. Lex Luthor, is a good thing because he feels like Superman is a character. Superman is his all-being god that if he really wanted to, he could destroy the Earth in a fraction of a second. So that's his motivation, right? Bowser, the reason why he captures Peach is because Peach's magic is able to stop him from taking over the world.
All right, I remember what I was saying. So what I was gonna say is like you have to. As I've gotten older and watched more stuff, right? Like I realized that like you have this period where you start off with simple shit, and then you strive for more complex shit, and then you have a resurgence where you realize no, things don't need to be that complex, and you kind of meet somewhere in the middle, right? So like you see this phenomenon with like shitty fanfic writers, right? There are shitty fanfic writers that feel the need to overcomplicate everything, right? They're like, a story's only good if it's complex, so they make it stupidly complex, right? I'm talking like. Look at like overly complex powers, for example. Like I've seen some shit where it's like, I have these 5 crystals, and when I step counterclockwise and do this with my hand, like it's like, ugh, stop. Simple is better, right? It's not about the power itself, but how the power is being used. Similar to that, it's not about the motivation itself, but how the motivation is used and how the motivation is implemented within that particular character. So, the idea of wanting to live a peaceful life with Kira. Like, that's not a unique motivation, but what makes it unique is what is added on to it, right? It's like, he wants a peaceful life. So does everybody. But he has this insatiable fucking hand lust and murder lust. and he can't stop, and he kind of wants both. So he has this duality of like, I need to murder, but I also just kind of want to live peacefully, and that kind of conflicts, right? That's what makes an interesting villain. And hold on, real quick, and then I'll end off. And then so like as you move on through watching stuff, you'll come to realize that like the best kind of authors are the ones that really are able to be simple in their complexity, right? Where it's like, that's complex, but not in the sense that you think. Not in the sense of like, you know, look at all the big words, or look at all this different shit that happened to him. It's complex in a simple way, and it seems counterintuitive, but what I mean by that is like, you can have your Kiras where like, on the base level it looks complex, or it looks simple, but like, they're able to do a lot with one simple concept. So the concept itself isn't complex, but what they can do with it is complex. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because you agree with me that you think Dementio is a good villain from Paper Mario?
I have to remember. So all I remember from Dementio, because that was my childhood, right? But I don't remember exactly what his motivation was. All I remember is his like. I remember liking his aesthetic, his theme, the way he fought, his powers. I don't remember the actual motivation he had.
I like Dementio as a villain because Dementio was the true villain in the end, right?
Just in case you don't know what he's talking about. He's talking about Super Paper Mario for the Wii. Continue.
So basically, his whole motivation was he was going to rewrite the multiverse in his image, right? Simple, but I mean,
so the way he went like about it, egomaniac.
Yeah, but the way he went about it made him feel like, wow, like this guy was like, he manipulated so many people. He made you think that he was just a pawn. In reality, he was just using Count Bleck in order to make his own goals. Like, that's a respectable villain, you know. Like he used what he had to get to his motivation. May have been, you know, simple, but it's the way he went about his motivation what makes him an interesting villain.
The only thing I would want to know though is that like in that scenario, I would want to know why. Like what makes him so obsessed with himself? Is he just obsessed with himself, or did there something happen to make him obsessed with himself? I'm guessing you don't know because it's a Mario game.
So
I would still personally want a bit more than that, but I don't need like some crazy overly like Shakespearean complex thing either.
Because it's just like it interests me. You can agree with me that seeing someone, regardless, seeing them being so interested in a goal and them going towards that goal is just fascinating to see, right? Like that's the reason why I like.
I mean, like I said, like my best example is Kira, because when JoJo Part 4 fascinated me. That was really the part of JoJo where like Part 3 was good, but Part 4 was where I was like, oh, okay, because Kira just fascinated the fuck out of me, and it was that exactly what you said, right? Like his goal, I was very invested in how he was gonna accomplish his goal and if he was gonna accomplish his goal, right? To the point where like, you know, it's a good villain where like you are like afraid that their goal is gonna be ruined, right? So like with Kira, every time someone almost found his identity, I was like, oh geez, oh no, you know, like oh Kira, oh my god, you know, you don't let them find out.
Oh my god. Oh god, I was like, bro, I was rooting for Kira, bro. Like, I was rooting for him.
He just wants a nice nap, bro. Like, do you remember when he was fucking crawling down the street? Like, I just want to go home and take a nap. It's been such a long day. And he's like bloody from Jotaro, and I'm like, oh my god, my boy. I almost forget that you're a mass murderer.
Like, oh my god. See,
that's a good ass villain, yeah.
See, yeah, that's a fucking good one. So, ending this video off, I just feel like people shouldn't overcomplicate what a villain should be. A villain doesn't need a redemption arc. A villain doesn't need to be overly complex. A villain just needs to be essentially themselves. If a writer or whatever, a developer wants to create a villain, just have a base for that villain, and then just make sure that the villain, because you know there are bad villains that are simple. It's inevitable, but just because a villain is simple doesn't mean they're bad.
Well, at the end of the day, characters are based off of people, right? And people really, at the end of the day, also aren't that complex if you think about it. At least on the surface level, they're not that complex. They get complex when you really delve into their lives. And I think that's the best way to make any character, right? Like, you don't need to make them... I feel the balance of writing is, like, not making them so complex on an immediate look, right? So, like, when you first see the character, I think bad writers might be tempted to, like, dump all the info about the character immediately. Like, here's everything about them. But, like, I think it's better to discover things about a character in the same way you would discover things about a friend, right? Like, slowly getting to know more and more about them. And that makes it so they can seem more simple, but you can keep adding on little details that, like, make them their own unique person, you know? And so, I haven't seen the complaints that you have. You're talking that, like, can you give, like, a quick example of, like, the kind of complaints you've been seeing?
It's just most of the people saying like, how it's been a while. You know, people keep saying how like certain villains aren't good because of how simple they are, or that they need to have like there has to be something more than just like they want to do this, and this. You know, it's just very basic.
I'm gonna guess it was probably people like dissing DBZ or something, like Frieza's not a good villain or something.
Yeah, people like this One Piece, you know, saying like characters like Crocodile or Lucci aren't good villains and shit like that. You know, like it's
because Crocodile just wanted to get Pluton. Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'll end off by saying I think it's important to do enough to make the character feel unique to themselves. Like, it's like you need to have enough details to where, like, even if like let's say you have 3 details about a villain, and maybe those individual details seem pretty basic, right? Like, okay, Crocodile, he wants to get an ancient weapon. He once fought one of the most powerful people in the sea and got fucked over, and he's got sand powers, and he owns, you know, he runs like a casino. He pretended to be like the hero of the country. So you see how I just added a bunch of those fucking facts, right? If you take any individual one, like, okay, just one of those, okay, that's basic, right? But when you take every single one together and put them together, that's what makes Crocodile. That is his character, right? And that's any character. So I think as long as you have enough individual facts to make them feel like their own unique character, that's what makes a good character, right? Like, and it's when you don't have enough of those individual little things that makes a bad character.
Fucking amazing. By the way, bro moment, when you were saying when you were smooth, the way you started off the sentence, you were just like, at the end of the day, I was gonna say that, but then you said it before me. So bro moment right there.
At the end of the day.
So overall,
you almost said it. I saw it.
Yeah. So overall, I just think that, you know, just have an open mind when it comes to villains, and leave in the comments below what you.
Yeah, tell me about some villains, bro. What do you like?
Tell us about what you know. What's your favorite villain, and what do you like to see in a villain? And do you think villains should be more simple or complex? Let us know.
I do want to hear about that. Also, I'm going to mention this in a lot of the videos right now. When you're seeing this, I'm probably in the hospital. I'm going to be having an announcement video about this. I am getting surgery for a lung-related issue. So I will. I'm probably in the hospital as you see this. So if I'm conscious, I shall check the comments and please wish me luck. But yes, I also would love to hear about your villain stuff. And with that, peace.
And with that, peace.